let's go through the rest of the top 10, I guess, because they all have kind of interesting and similar cases, at least, right? So, at 3, you have Austin Ekeler, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, and Leonard Fournette. So, there's some of those guys there, the Derrick Henrys of the world who are still getting all of that value from rushing. There's still not a lot of Derrick Henry passes catching. I don't know if we really want a lot. I guess fantasy, we would want Derrick Henry pass catching, but if you're the Titans, you probably don't want to be building an offense around Derrick Henry pass catching. You probably want a little more efficient. And I think that's kind of the same thing. Like there's been the Joe Mixon thing. Is he ever going to catch passes? We kind of saw that like a little bit last year. But that's never been, the full aspect of his game. So are these guys that we just we know their roles, we kind of know what they're doing, or is there, still some potential to see more from some of these guys in like the 4 to 10 range?
I mean, yeah, you would like to see more receiving from Joe Mixon and especially Dalvin Cook, who's kind of getting that early offseason steam of he's lining up at wide receivers, which you hope to see a little bit because, when you look at the Vikings compared to what the Rams did, where Kevin O'Connell's coming from, I mean, they did use a running back at wide receiver on 100 snaps last year, and the Vikings, I believe, were at 28. So there should be a little bit more opportunity for Dalvin Cook, who's coming off of his career worst receiving season by far last year. But those guys, yeah, are players, when you look at like the archetype of the players, the talent they are, we know that they can be viable pass catchers. They just never have really gotten like enough of that work and really smashed. But they could be, like, if you run into a season where we can just get those guys to get targets, like you're flirting with potential being the RB1, and Dalvin Cook almost was the RB1 a couple years ago because of just on the strength of how many touchdowns he scored. When you can score that many touchdowns with like 40 to 50 receptions, you still can compete. But if we can get like a 60 catch season out of one of these guys, like there's definitely something to work with there. Derrick Henry is kind of just like a unicorn, right? Like, and it's one of these things. I don't know if he's like an exception to the rule type player, but we're going to really find out too, because not only does Derrick Henry not really have the smattering of receiving production compared to the field, but he's also the air quotes oldest. It's crazy to keep, this 28-year-old guy is like old, but he's like at the position and context of the position, it's like, man, we're almost treating him like a dinosaur, right? And he's coming off like the first major injury of his career. So it's like, how much this can impact, but he's 28 years old. If you look at it over the past 30 years, 66% of all RB1 scoring weeks have come from backs 26 years old and younger. And then that's even skewed even greater the past decade. 70.8% of all RB1 scoring seasons the past decade have been backs, younger than 27. So he's kind of the last time we even had a back that's as old as Derrick Henry lead the position in scoring was, Priest Holmes. And, this is going back, almost 20 years now. And the last time a back was over the age of 27, that was a top 6 scorer, was Mark Ingram back in 2017. And he was 28 years old at that point. But then when you look at like where we left off with Derrick Henry, I mean, he still was pacing to be the RB1 last year, kind of like right up against all of those like data points that I brought up. He was getting a career high 29 touches. He's just one of these guys you talk about. Like, is it the age, the touches, of these all things have they hit a crescendo? And does that make that kind of like worrisome? And then you also look at the way the Titans are structured, though, and it's like they're not changing anything they're going to do though either. So as long as he is healthy, like they're going to run this thing through him. It's pretty clear the way they've structured this team still, even this offseason. Like there's not a transition that they've set up to go away from Derrick Henry being this just guy that just is the El Tractorcito just carrying this offense. So he kind of was one of those guys you kind of just keep in kind of limbo. He's not a guy I draft a ton of when we get into like the seasonal stuff. This is when I usually start to look at like the wide receivers. We talked about the Justin Jeffersons, the Cooper Kupps. This is when you start to do some unique builds, like basically after Austin Ekeler, like those top 3 running backs, those dual threat guys, those are the guys I want to like really hone in on. And then it does get a little more gray this year.